Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the hands, not in terms of the exact hands, in terms of how the money went in or kind of the execution of the hand performed, but some of the strategy in the hands that I played from week 2 in 2017. And these are basically 3-bet pots, and we're looking at PO Solver for kind of the best approximation of the solution. And I'll talk about what it means in terms of approximation, but we will be looking at this in PO Solver. And the main decision points for some of these 3-bet pots, I think, really comes from pre-flop and how raises are executed and what we're doing with the raises and how we are constructing ranges. So I want to show this screen here in PO Solver, which is the pre-flop solution. And if you haven't watched the intro video to PO Solver, please feel free to do. This is the pre-flop screen that we skipped there, and we'll just talk about this for a few brief seconds. We have an out-of-position range that we're defined here, and it's easiest to see because we have all of the, or not all of them, but we have quite a few aces, suited aces through here. We have an in-position range that's narrower. It's basically 12.8% of the total range available to us, so basically 160 or 170 combinations, but it does not have as many suited aces through here. And so this is basically our range that's here. Effective stacks of 1,000. We have some dead money in the pot, so on and so forth. This is the basic setup. But what's really important, I think, through here, one of the most interesting features, pardon me, I have a little hiccup, is going to be how we set up the pre-flop tree. And what we're doing here is we have a root element. That's what I've clicked right here. Then we have the opportunity to go ahead and raise. Right here, we have the opportunity to limp. We also have the opportunity to fold. Once we've raised, the out-of-position player has the opportunity to raise to cap, which is 120. And I should say this is all oriented towards spread limit. But actually, I do think a lot of these pre-flop concepts do cross over to no limit to a certain extent, or what I would call kind of no limit 101. Certainly, there's more advanced no limit theory, 3-betting, 4-betting, ranges and strategy, blah blah blah, but I do think the transition, the pre-flop transition from spread limit to no limit does make for a good 101 kind of thing. That being said, we do the raise to 120, we have the raise to 80, raise to 40, we can call or they can fold. Then likewise as well too, we have re-raises to 220, re-raise the 80 bet to cap of 180, and then raise to 120. The items in green here, obviously folds are folds, and the hand is done. But the items in green here are going to be what's called in the software our exit points. And what we mean by an exit point is this is where we start to begin the post-flop calculation. So at this point, let's consider the line of the root element, raise to 20, raise to 120, re-raise to 220, then call. What we're doing here in this exact situation, our flop trends and rivers are basically all 100-bet caps with min raises, because that's all we can do. That's basically the structure of the game. If we look over here at this point, we have a call after the 120. We have a slightly smaller, we have a half pot. We have a half pot opportunity to bet, and then likewise we move into the 100 cap, and then we just go through here. So basically it's going to be single bet sizes, single raise sizes with a bunch of different exit points. I think that this analysis is a reasonable approximation. It's probably a little more academic rather than concrete in terms of its analysis. It basically, the takeaways here I think are really food for thought. And the reason being here is I don't necessarily think many of our opponents are at least in the live spread limit game, are logically thinking about what is my raising range with a 40 bet of min, and then what is a raising range of 60 to go for 80 total, and then what is my raising range with cap. I think that there definitely can be 2 sizes, but I think 3 gets a bit much. I don't think most opponents are thinking to that level, and maybe you don't even have to, and that's why it doesn't occur. But it's interesting to throw it through the magic math machine and see what the equilibrium strategy comes out to be at the very end. We'll take a look, kind of in closing, at the tail end of the conversation. We'll take a look at a much simpler model. that goes ahead and just has 2 raise sizes in here. And really the whole thought process here becomes what kind of range construction do we need to continue in the hand? And continue can be a call, or continue can be a re-raise, so on and so forth. And then as well too, I think a contrasting point is, what does it mean, or how do we react to when we encounter these raise sizes? So let's go over here, jump over to the browser, and we'll go ahead and take a look at it here. So let's make sure we're at our root element. So this is basically our tighter default range. And what I mean by default range is, this range is if I had to explain Spread Limit Holdem to somebody in 30 minutes to get started, this is basically a starting range of hands for them to work from. And again, I don't think there's anything too insane here. It basically has all of your pairs, opportunity to create sets. It has all of your suited broadways for the opportunity to make royal flush. You also have your some stronger offsuit here between your ace queen off, ace jack off, ace king queen off, and then you have some suited connectors over here at a much lower frequency for board coverage in later position. So you can bet your very reasonable draws here. So we go ahead and have this range, and basically what PO Solver has computed here, and this is not, I think, too obscene or too unheard of. It's basically computing a what would this be? Was it 2-to-1 ratio? There, basically 75% to almost 25%, 70-30 kind of sort of thing. I think this is a common ratio you see if you've read a couple books of No Limit Holdem in the past couple years, in terms of with what frequencies you should be taking certain activities. That being said, we're going to be raising 76% of our range here, and we're going to be calling with 23%. Arguably, I think you could even take a pure strategy of just raising, this entire range. I should say up to this point, we just basically have $15 of dead money in here with blinds. So basically, the idea here is that we've gone limp, and we have some, or limp, and we've got some dead money in the pot, and you're going to be raising here for value. So arguably, you could even take a pure strategy of raising with this entire range here, rather than only calling with some combinations. Or you could actually shift to a pure strategy of raising with the top portion of this range, and then just calling with the bottom part here. 5s, 4s, 3s, and deuces, even 6s. Their value is pretty much just set mining, unless you have late position where you can kind of be a little more bluffy, so on and so forth, some more advanced strategy concepts. But in terms of range composition, this is what it's telling us from an equilibrium, or I also believe kind of a mixed strategy, but again, some very quick bullet point ideas of how you could construct a range using more of a pure strategy. So that being said, the most common activity that we will be doing is going ahead and raising with 129, basically 130 combinations, or 76% of that range, basically 77. Let's go ahead and do that and see what we have here. So this is basically our opponent that has the next opportunity to ask. So again, maybe this is somebody out of a blind, somebody that's behind you. The exact software as it's developed here is really developed for heads-up scenarios. So like I said, that's where even true multi-way equilibrium / GTO solving doesn't exist in a commercial form yet that's accessible. These are best approximations. So if we take a look at what is doing here in the range, you can see there's quite a bit of green. So they're going to be calling with 60% of our range, 60% of their range, if we look at over here. So that's going to be 172 combinations. But let's look at what they're going to be raising with. So if we look at kind of what is the big bet, the raise to 120, when there are 3 sizes available, they really are not doing the 120 to any significant extent. Even with aces, they're really not raising to the 120 cap. It's 4.3 combinations, or 1.5% of their range. And if you kind of see focus, hopefully you've taken this video and moved it up to full screen, this raise to 120 is slivered amongst various combinations that you'll do kind of a sub percentage of the time. So you can see over here between ace 3 suited, you're going to be raising to 120 with that exact holding about a quarter of the time, and then 40% of the time you're going to be raising to 80, or calling the remaining percent of the time. These numbers, kind of where I'm moving the mouse over here, should all add up to 1 100 or 1 for each individual cell. It's not like you go ahead and see over here. We'll just go ahead and move over to aces. Clearly, it's going to be a raise, but the greatest frequency is going to be that 80 bet. And that's what we have here. So if we take a look at that, we can see that the main frequency of putting out a big bet happens with aces, kings, ace king suited. You can even see, it's actually quite interesting here, where queen actually draws off and starts to become a call a majority of the time, even in a pre-flop situation. Jacks is a call in most situations as well too. Probably what is interesting, if we just take a look at kind of where the colors distribute themselves, we can kind of see down over here, ace-7 suited and 6-5 suited do pick up the 80 bet of reasonable frequency, or a reasonable percentage of the time, 40%, 42%, and then 25 quarter, 30% over here. And then you can also see over here on your ace wheel cards, it goes ahead and distributes itself over here. And I think the main takeaway in terms of how this is distributing is there are clear value raises. So your aces, your kings, and even your ace king suited are going to be clear value raises. Even your ace queen suited might even be considered a value raise too, and queen. But the frequency and the number of combinations that you value raise with, you should also balance that to a reasonable extent with bluffs. So the concept of balance, pretty common in poker, and I think that's what the tool is telling us here, is that you're going to want to balance with some good bluffs. So again, 8-7 suited, 6-5 suited are pretty reasonable a certain frequency of the time, and then obviously your ace wheel combinations over here, go ahead and do that as well too. So like I said, I think if we broke this out even further, for sake of recording and time, not going to do it right now, but if we looked at the EV, I can definitely see that there would be a stronger EV with your aces and kings, ace king suited, and then the rest of the hands, even where a good portion of these raises do exist in their allocations, they're probably going to be break even. But again, they're good bluffs. They retain equity or can gain equity against hands, so on and so forth. So this is, again, when you start to see these little slivers of the distribution, this is more of a mixed strategy and an equilibrium solution, vice pure strategies. And I think I'll do another video at a later time on mixed versus pure, but that's kind of, again, how these distribute it. So let's go ahead and look at the easiest one. The core premise here is how we continue in a hand. When I played the previous session on week 2, I got min raised in a spot, min raised to 40. I mean, I think the ranges kind of looked almost exactly like this, but my exact holding was queen 10 suited. So root, I had queen 10 suited. I did open 20, so that's going to be this cell right here. It was actually queen 10 of hearts, so I did my raise to 20. I got min raised to 40, and then let's take a look here again. The core premise here is where do we continue in a hand? If we take a look here, queen 10 suited, I mean, it's just going to be a call such a great percentage of the time. So what is that? If we look over on the right hand side, 92.5%. So if the queen of hearts, 10 of hearts, the middle one, we're obviously not going to be re-raising to 120, but we are going to call and continue in the hand and see a flop. In that exact hand, I did flop a flush draw, turned open-ended, and then got there on the open end on the river and took down a pretty reasonable pot. The opponent there probably had king if I had to guess. I mean, I think that they were honestly value betting and calling with a legit hand. But in terms of the pre-flop play, I think the mistake there might have been not to raise to a larger sizing, because again, what the solver is showing us here in terms of the game state, the only thing that we're folding here is really going to be our king queen offsuit, ace jack offsuit, and we're even not going to be folding it about 50% of the time. We're going to go ahead and find a fold. But anything else, it really does not force us to go ahead and reshape our range to really any significant extent. Now let's go ahead over here, let's go back to our raise, and we'll jump back here and we'll say let's go ahead and get raised to 80. Now this is where, in terms of, we open to 20, we go ahead and get raised to 80. What are we doing in terms of continuing with the hand? So if we look at our raise to 180, certainly our aces and our ace king suited and our king king, I think those are going to be obviously the clear value. Any place you start to see these little slivers, I think this is just basically going to be kind of the balance point, where the number of combinations that we are re-raising, the number of combinations that we're re-raising with, we're going to want to balance that out with a certain percentage of the time. According to what we are raising with. So that being said, if we take a look, we can certainly see here all of our offsuit combinations just go out the window. They become folds. A majority, certainly, I guess probably the easiest part down here is going to be our small pocket pairs. Certainly become folds. Eights, nines, tens, jacks, do become calls a certain percentage of the time, and then also re-raises. I think this is kind of more bluffy or balancing in terms of the re-raising. I think the interesting part right here though is with your suited aces. If you truly are limiting your suited aces to ace 10 plus suited preflop, these do continue in the hand. So these can go ahead and call or re-raise kind of as a semi-bluff right through here. But the main thing here I just want to kind of focus on is it does force us to reshape our range as opposed to the min raise to 40. So it should have that effect on what our opponent is calling with or even re-raising with. So let's go ahead and take a look over here, and let's go ahead and look at the raise to 120. Now this is the most infrequent because I think that the hands that are let's just jump back into the 80 here. The hands that are calling or even value re-raising or bluff re-raising, when we go ahead and see the raise to 120, we'll go ahead and see a look here. Yeah, basically almost all of the call. Goes out the window, and then we go ahead and basically we're left with either you are going to fold or you're going to go ahead and re-raise to 220. Re-raise back to cap. And the frequencies do change here. Certainly if you took time to pause and go back and forth in the video, you could go ahead and see kind of what those frequencies are, or kind of judge how far a raise cap goes across these different boxes. I'm not sure that this exact analysis is necessarily too valuable in the live game, just because again I don't think many players are thinking about their ranges and also what the bet sizing means and how that interacts with the opponent's range. I definitely think a sizing of 2 is probably more common, where they might have a min or a kind of a bet plus 50, bet plus 60. That's what the 80 is, and then they have the 120 cap. I think that this analysis is really oriented towards an equilibrium solution where three raising values or 3 raising amounts are distinct possibilities. But the key takeaway here is how our ranges are shaped in response. The min raise, there's really no interaction here. It looks almost like the range that we start with or kind of open with. Definitely once we get to the 80 raise, we go ahead and start to see that more combinations do start to fold out. We do have the value raise caps here, and then I do also think we balance that with a certain amount of semi-bluff. I don't think there's anything that's a naked bluff that's here. Maybe that king 10 might be kind of thin. Arguably 7s plus here, even though this happens to a very low frequency. What we can see here is these hands do retain equity. Given the various number of flops that can come out. You've got a pocket pair. Ace high. If somebody is raising or re-raising with an ace X suited type of combination, it can brick the flop, and they're just sitting there with ace high, and you can find yourself basically kind of in a 70-30, 75-25 position with good amount of equity going into the turn. That being said, I did play a hand in the exact session where I did go ahead and face a raise from 80 out of the small blind. It was from a player who I did acknowledge after the hand having kings, and I don't doubt that one single bit. The person is very solid in terms of their overall play. The person, I think plays a very pure strategy when it comes to their value bets. That the value bets are almost always value bets. I don't think there's hardly any bluff that's there. And this is pretty interesting too. I did call with ace queen off. The flop came out low. got into a raise re-raise on the flop, but then an ace came out on the turn and bailed me out. And then I got a call on the turn for 100 bet, got a call on the river for 100 bet, and took down, I think what was probably, if I remember correctly, or if I read all that right, out of the top of my head, probably about maybe like a $1,100, $1,200 pot total, just because we're putting 100 bets in there after a certain point. But I was definitely, in terms of the solver, definitely more out of line, calling with the ace queen off, but the deck bailed me out there. You can see, the equity edge or the equity bonus that you get from having suited combinations is extremely valuable in having the opportunity to flop flush draws, flop top pairs, so on and so forth. So that's how the range composition composes itself. I'm going to switch over here real quick and kind of talk through kind of a similar analysis. It's not quite as detailed. I wanted to go through this with the 3 actual bet sizings to show how our range could prospectively get shaped in response. And go ahead and let me bring over here this other window. Okay, great. So when we go ahead and we have a similar kind of range, I'll just go to the root element. You can see again very quickly this is pretty similar. It calculates out just a little bit differently. If we go ahead and have a raise 20, and then we go ahead and execute that. Now, where there are only 2 options of raise to 80 or raise to 120, you can see the 120 does exist to a much greater extent. It orients itself towards aces down here with the ace wheel combinations, and then a little bit more with our suited connector type of combinations. Certainly, the raise to 80 is more value-y with respect to ace king suited, king queen, so on and so forth. If we take a look at the raise of 80, now this exact analysis does not have the re-raise option in it. We just wanted to see, what would continue. Certainly aces and kings, if you have that, that's completely valid to go ahead and re-raise. But just wanted to take a look and say, what are we continuing in the hand with when there's only 2 options to raise? So we certainly continue in some portion or see a flop either via re-raise or call with our suited aces. We have our suited kings through here, and obviously our large pocket pairs, and then the higher end of the medium pocket pairs. We'll go ahead and take a look at the raise of 120. We go ahead and have the same ace suited, and then we have our pocket pairs, our premiums, the top end of our medium pocket pairs, but then we're also dropping our suited kings, our offsuit, and then dropping off all these other pocket pairs to a greater frequency. So take a moment. You're welcome to scroll back and just pause the screens and take a look at this. But a different type of analysis, or slightly different perspective when there are two raise sizes that are there, as opposed to 3. I think the 3 is important because it shows kind of what the min raise does. And again, just kind of jumping in here, you can immediately see where the min raise to 40 on the other analysis really didn't do much to shape the range. The raise to 80 certainly does go through here, and we start to drop off again. Small pocket pairs, we drop off a good or greater portion of the offsuit, and then our weaker in terms of the high card value. Kings, jacks, tens, we drop off the weaker suited cards, and then to a greater extent, when we see the raise size of 120, we can start to see, again, almost all the offsuit drops off. We even start to lose ace king a certain percentage of the time, and then we drop off our small pocket pairs to a greater extent, and then you can see all of our king suited goes away, and we're basically just playing for the premiums, the premium pocket pairs, the high card value aces that are suited, and then kind of to the top end of the even the medium pocket pairs, which is going to be jacks and tens. So I hope some of this analysis is helpful or interesting, a little bit about some of the play that occurred in the prior session. Please feel free to leave any sort of comments or shoot any questions over. Would be happy to chat. All right, best of luck.